Good morning, narrators. So it's Ms. Warren back with some writing for you. So we've been talking about narrative stories, correct? And the things that narrative stories have to have. Remember, a narrative story is written by the character, so it uses words like I, me, my, we. It has your feelings in it. It has, let's look at our poster again to figure out. Oh, remember, it's about a real life event. It's written with feelings, and it's written in the order that it happened. So that's called sequential order. But there's one more thing that a narrative has to have, and we're going to talk about that. So a narrative story has to have a setting. So who remembers what a setting is from what we've learned already in school? Yeah, the setting of your story is where the story took place, right? So if I think about my story I told you yesterday about spaghetti, when I made spaghetti for dinner, where do you think the setting of that was? Yeah, in my house, probably in my kitchen, because that's where we cook, right? So my house would be the setting. Do you think that knowing the setting of the story is important? Yeah, it gives us a lot of information. So today we're going to read a book called All the Places to Love. This book is about a boy named Eli, and Eli is going to tell us a narrative, and we get to see and hear about the setting of his narrative. So you might hear some of those narrative words again, and I want you to tap your leg when you hear them, okay? So this is called All the Places to Love. On the day I was born, my grandmother wrapped me in a blanket made from the wool of her sheep. She held me up in the open window so that I heard first was the wind. Then what I saw first were all the places to love. The valley, the river flowing down over rocks, the hilltops where the blueberries grew. My grandfather was painting the barn, and when he saw me, he cried. He carved my name, Eli, on the rafters beside his name, and grandmother's name, and the names of my papa and mama. Mama carried me on her shoulders before I could walk. Through the meadows and hayfields, the cows watched us and the sheep scattered. The dogs ran ahead looking back with sly smiles. When the grass was high, only their tails showed. When I was older, Papa and I plowed the fields. Where else is soil so sweet? He said. Once Papa and I lay down in the field holding hands, and the birds surrounded us. Raucous black gettles, redwings, crows in the dirt that scattered like pirates. When we left, Papa put a handful of dirt in his pocket, and I did too. My grandmother loved the river best of all the places to love. That sound like a whisper, she said, gathering in pools where trout flashed like jewels in the sunlight. Grandmother sailed little bark boats downriver to me with messages. I love you, Eli, one said. We jumped from rock to rock to rock, across the river to where the woods began, where bunchberry grew under the pine needle path, and trillium bloomed under the beech tree was a soft, rounded bed where a deer had slept. The bed was warm when I touched it. When spring rains came and the meadows turned to marsh, Cattails stood like guards and killdeers called. Ducks nested by marsh marigolds, and the old turtle, his shell all worn, no matter how slow, still surprised me. Sometimes we climbed to the place Mama loved best, with our blueberry buckets and a chair for my grandmother, to the blueberry barren where no trees grew, the sky an arm's length away, where marsh hawks skimmed over the land and bears came to eat fruit, and wild turkeys left footprints for us to find, like messages. Where else, said my mama, can I see the sunrise on one side and the sun set on the other? My grandfather's barn is sweet smelling and dark and cool. Leather harnesses hang like paintings against old wood, and hay dust float like gold in the air. Grandfather once lived in the city, and once he lived by the sea, but the barn is the place he loves the most. Where else, he says, can the soft sounds of cows chewing make all the difference in the world? Today we wait, him sitting on a wooden flat chair and me on the hay, until much later my grandmother holds up a small bundle in the open window, wrapped in a blanket made from the wool of her sheep, and my grandfather cries. Together we carve the name Sylvie in the rafter, beside the names of grandfather and mother and mama and papa and me. My sister is born. Someday I might live in the city. Someday I might live near the sea. But soon I will carry Sylvie on my shoulders through the fields. I will send her messages downriver in small boats, and I will watch her at the top of the hill trying to touch the sky. I will show her my favorite place, the marsh, where ducklings follow their mothers like tiny tumbles of leaves. And there's just a nice little picture. So where do you think the setting of this story was? Yeah, I would agree. I think the setting of Eli's narrative is the farm where he lives. Do you have a place that's special to you? I want you to think about it. All right, I'm going to flip you around so I can show you my writing. All right, so I have my writing paper. I'm going to write my name. All right, so we're going to talk about special places today. So our story we read was All the Places to Love. And I want you to think about a special place. So a special place for me is my grandma's house. So I'm going to write a narrative about that. So when I was little, I would go to my grandma's house and help feed the cows and bake cookies and plant the garden. So I'm going to pick a couple things that were my favorite to put in my story. So I'm going to write, I go to my grandma's house. So at my grandma's house, I help plant the garden and bake cookies. So those are my two favorite things I do with my grandma. I help in the garden and We ate cookies. It makes me happy. Remember, we have to put our feelings in there. So we're slowly making our sentences longer and longer. So how many sentences do I have in this? Read with me. I go to my grandma's house. There's a period. I help in the garden and we bake cookies. There's another period. It makes me happy! Exclamation mark. So there's 3 sentences in my story today. So today your focus will be writing a story and make sure your setting is in there, right? My setting is my grandma's house. That's where my story takes place. And I also have my feelings. And it happened, I wrote my story in the order that it happened. So I'm going to draw a picture of the garden. So I don't have any crayons or I would add color to it. So there's some lettuce. Here's some carrots. You can only see the tops of carrots, right? And here's my grandma. And me when I was little. All right. So make sure you send a picture to your teachers. We'd love to see your work.